going to be, even if that person is with you the rest of your life partner, at some point, either you're going to die or they're going to die. Painful things I've heard from my clients when they come to a point when we face it head on, when they process it, like, I wish I had met you 20 years ago. That would have saved me 20 years of time with this person. And I'm not talking about the political bridges and walls. That's a different story. I'm talking about your personal side. And I want to talk a little bit about, there are three areas I'm going to go into, but I want to talk a little bit about what letting go looks like and how does it show up. And I'll share a paraphrase version of a quote from a philosopher who said, and it's not all about forgiveness, but it's a lot about letting go. And I'll talk about the two sides of it. But here's how the phrase went: not forgiving someone or not letting go, a version of that, is like holding on to a hot coal and hoping that it punishes the other person. And sometimes letting go is about forgiveness. Sometimes letting go is about just dropping the thing that has no resolution and solution, to be honest. Sometimes it's about intentionality. I'll talk about two sides of it. The first side is the survival side. The survival side is usually related to trauma, hurt, past. We all have them. If you're a human being who's lived a certain amount of years, there's no way you haven't had some kind of hurt in your life, some kind of betrayal, some kind of emotional effect that has scarred a part of you. The intensity will vary with different people, but the scar will be there. The problem is that those scars can have current effect on you. That's one side of it. And we'll talk about what that is. The other side of it is, and I've talked about this before, and I'll share that video as well. I've talked about letting go. Can you move forward without healing all trauma? I really believe you can, because there's another side of you that's the conscious side. Even if you are healing through traumatic periods in your life, whatever that looks like, you can still, as a human being, override those traumas to be conscious. Now, there are traumas that are hard to override. They have to be processed, and I'll talk about what that looks like. But the other side of it is being conscious of how love, connection, relationships show up in your life. And this doesn't just apply to your personal relationships. We're also talking about business relationships. I've actually, not just one, I've actually had the privilege of working with, collaborating with business owners who have been fairly successful in their field, but also coaching and mentoring many of them too, where this is a common trait. You can tell that they're very successful. To most people on the outside, they are very successful. But when you work closer with them, you find out something very interesting. You find out that they could be 10 times more successful, 100 times more successful if they could deal with that one thing in their life. And it's usually related to a hurt, a pain that they carry with them. Sometimes that pain pushes them, but sometimes that same pain stops them from trusting others around them. That same pain stops them from collaborating with others. That same pain stops them from actually viewing opportunity in the world. And most people don't see that because they already see these people as successful, but you have no idea how successful these people would be if they could let go of that. And sometimes I have had the privilege of coaching and mentoring these people, and I've been able to help them. Sometimes I've collaborated with them. It wasn't my role as a coach to do that. If I could, as a leader, I would do that. But they've carried that pain with them as a badge, as sort of a badge of honor that I can't trust anybody because a few people have hurt me. And so that's the first piece of, if you really want better relationships, business and personal, in your life, the first piece of letting go is releasing old hurt. And what does that look like? And this is not just, oh, well, I'm not an emotional person, I'm logical. I can guarantee you, no matter how logical you are, your emotions are a part of it. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, sensitive, not sensitive. They are a normal part of your thinking process. You can think of yourself as the most logical person. I guarantee you think with emotions. You don't think outside of emotions. And here's how it shows up. Most people, when they say I'm logical, they mean one of two things. Either they can push their emotions down long enough for them to be able to think rationally in the moment to a degree, but they don't know how much they're influenced by that emotional process because they're in denial of the process. Or they recognize that emotions affect them, so they try to be in a state of peace and joy, or at least acceptance in the moment that allows them to think rationally. And there's a technical element to this because our and this is the big difference between a human being and a computer. A human being looks at the world and feels something and thinks about it. It doesn't matter which human being it is. And what we do, because we have a powerful memory, we connect it to our past. So if the past, there aren't too many hurts, we've taken the positives out of the past, the lessons out of the past, the good experiences, and we've let go of the hurt. How that shows up is that, okay, I'm at peace related to the past, and I've I feel good about this moment, so it releases the survival emotions, and then you can think clearly right now. Or somebody's mind is powerful enough where they can push down the old emotions, but even in that case, if they're mentally powerful enough, but they're holding on to this weight of emotions that they're constantly trying to push down. If they could drop that bag, they could think much better, but they haven't recognized that yet. So what does that mean with release old hurts? That weight that people are holding, most of us, I've held it. I still hold parts of those weights that I'm currently working on. So I don't pretend to be like, oh, I've let go of everything. No, I haven't. There are days where I work on that. There are days where I struggle with that. And every one of us are going to struggle in one way or another. But release old hurts, what that means is in your past, it doesn't matter how old you were a young kid or somewhere in your young adult, teenage years, wherever it was, somebody at some point consciously or inadvertently hurt you. And a part of you will carry that with you. And that hurt will show up as a part of your perception if you're not aware of it. And I'll give you an example of that. It's been very dominant in my female clients. A lot of times, especially those women who have been successful in a specific field, especially if it's a male dominated field, they will go into that, and one of their first objections is that I have a lot of disadvantages. It's a male dominated field. I will be treated unfairly, this, that, and the other. And here's the thing that they're missing a lot of times. They're only focused on their disadvantages. They're not looking at their advantages in that field. And I can actually happily say that I've actually steered a lot of quite a few very successful women in their field who were in male dominated scenarios, and they started to see the positive aspects of it, their advantages in there that actually men did not have. And the only way they could see it is if they could let go of their hurt, personal hurt from men in their life, and also their collective hurt. If you notice, we also have collective hurt. So, for example, there's been a huge battle over the past 50 plus years around women's rights. The battle sometimes justified, but the battle was about their rights. It wasn't a conflict towards men, but it became about men. So whenever they went into a situation with more men, they always associated the conflict was with men, not with their rights. So the men became the enemy. So every time they would go into a situation, they would always feel disadvantaged. As soon as they start to see that, my challenge is not with the men. My challenge is with the environment that doesn't treat me fairly. And then as soon as they started focusing on, okay, how can I ally myself with the ones who are my supporters, whether they're men or women? And actually, interestingly, in most of these cases, you find out that their biggest allies became men and their worst enemies became women in the in the same environment, which I found very odd. They found it odd. And so they had to let go of two things. They had to let go of collective hurt that they associated with their identity as women, they had to let go of personal hurt in their life from the men in their life. The same thing can show up for men as well. The same time can show up with any kind of identity you carry, because that identity is a common identity with other people. So you could carry the hurt of being a worker, or a middle class. For example, you might say that, you know what, middle class have been paying taxes, a lot of taxes for the past few decades. You could say that. And you could carry the hurt from that. And you could be constantly in conflict with the system about that. But the problem is that if your focus just goes there, you cannot see the opportunity, the good and the positive on the other side. So the first step, and this, and again, this shows up in so many areas, I won't even cover them, but I think the point is clear. For you to shift your perception towards seeing opportunity, the first piece is being aware, at least being aware. And then the second piece of it is letting go of that, because it's not hurting other people. It's actually hurting you and those around you. And also, just as a side, there's a whole movement of people who are trying to help people with trauma that have made this a very weird thing, that being hurt, not forgiving is a right. You shouldn't be forgiving. You shouldn't even have an intention, because that hurts you. There's a technical reason for that, but it's become this big thing that it's bad advice to let go. I think that's completely bullshit. I think that comes from modern studies of how trauma works and it affects people. And the thing that they're pointing to is you can't forgive without processing. So they're trying to say not to bypass processing for forgiveness. And I've walked my clients through this, and when they've tried to rush the process of that, it backfires on them. But that doesn't mean you can't forgive. You can't let go, because it's not actually about other people or this person. It's actually about how you want to, the quality of your life, the quality of how you want to interact with other people, because it directly affects your perception of how you deal with people. So the first step is release old hurts. And this is going to be part of the worksheet that you're going to work on this week. It's going to help you think through how it's showing up specifically in your life and how you can deal with it a little bit better. And then we're going to go deeper into it on Thursday. Now, the other 2 points that I'm going to go into go away from survival. The first step is to deal with the survival emotions and the past hurt. The other 2 points, the first point is intention to love. So what does that mean? That means a big part of this is realizing that we're all affected by our past. We'll carry it if we're not aware of it. We'll carry the hurt forward. But the other side of it is, like I mentioned, is the growth side of us. What intention do you wake up regardless of the past? Is it part of your thinking process when you wake up in the morning where you want to build bridges versus build walls in front of you? And I'm not talking about the political bridges and walls. That's a different story. I'm talking about your personal side. Personal side in the morning with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends, with your team members, with other collaborators. Do you get up with arms in your hand and walls in front of you, and that's your normal pattern? Or do you actually have an intention? How do I want to show up with my people around me? And is my intention towards protection? And in most cases, if you don't have an intention, it is towards protection, self-preservation. Or is it to actually extend more grace, extend more trust, extend more, and that is hard to do. And that's for the third point, which is love with courage. And that's where the courage piece comes in. Most people don't realize, and actually the most painful piece part of my life that I've realized, and me personally and most of my clients, anybody I've run into, most people recognize that love takes courage when they either lose a loved one, if they die, or they break apart. But in most cases, when they die and they can do nothing, and they realize why are they keep going. And once they start to process the emotions, they keep thinking, why am I so hurt? Why did this person have to leave? It creates an existential dilemma too. But what you recognize is that we knew at some level that I was going to lose this person, either to death or to some circumstances, or they grow up or they move on, whatever the case is. So the initial intention for love required courage, because I knew for sure 100% I was going to get hurt. But most people put that aside. and say, no, no, this person is going to be, even if that person is with you the rest of your life partner, at some point, either you're going to die or they're going to die. And that is one of the most painful process for most people. Same thing with people's children. When somebody's children, they go off and they become adults, they go their own path. You're not exposed to them to the same level as you were before. You have to let go, and that's hurtful. So there are two things in here. One, it actually takes day-to-day intention to trust people, to connect with people, to have the intention to bring people together. And I'm talking about your immediate environment, your business partners, your family, your friends, those kind of people. And then the second piece is recognizing this truth, this deeper truth, that it actually takes courage in every moment to show up with the intention of love. And then it also circles back to the hurt pieces, that when you chose to be in a relationship, you had to accept the fact that you're going to get hurt at some point. And it also gives you this chance, this perception and perspective to take accountability for that intention. And a lot of people might ask, well, what about the family that I was born into? I never signed up for that. Well, for one thing, like, I actually like a spiritual, there are certain traditions that go back to this, is that before you even came into this physical world, as a soul, you had to decide to come into a specific family. You can take on that belief or not. I actually have taken that on. I'm like, I've chosen everything in my life, even the crappy parts of my life. But let's say you don't accept that. If you were born and raised in a family where you felt hurt and you carry that with you, then as an adult, it becomes your responsibility and your job to create the kind of family that you wanted, create the kind of community that you wanted. But there's an accountability that to take on. I really think that it's a healthy belief to take on that. You know what? It's a healthy belief to take on that. You know what if I did have a choice to come into the environment I came in, and I came in for a reason? But let's say you're not willing to accept that. The second piece of it is, have you taken on the responsibility to accept hurt as a natural part of life and show up with love anyway, with the intention of that, and carry that with you with courage in a moment to moment? That is a hard thing to do. Anybody who's lived long enough know that from little annoyances with people to full-blown triggers to people not speaking. I've worked with clients who haven't spoken to their family members, a son, a daughter, a sister, a brother, a friend, for decades. We're not talking weeks and months, for decades, because of one challenge they couldn't either resolve or let go of. These are real things. And that challenge could have been dealt with 30 years ago. And one of the most painful things I've heard from my clients, when they come to a point when we face it head on, when they process it, like, I wish I had met you 20 years ago. That would have saved me 20 years of time with this person. And it's still not easy for them, but they somehow muster up the courage to go reach out to them. And in some cases, that person is not even open to connect with them. But just the act of showing up with courage completely changes their perception of relationships. They begin to become open to courage. One side point I want to mention, sometimes, a lot of times people kind of conflate letting go and forgiveness with letting people in who are destructive in their life. There are people who are in abusive relationships. You can let go, you can forgive, but you don't have to let them in your life physically. There are people you need to let go of who are destructive, and they haven't become aware enough to respect your boundaries and who you are and how to treat you better. Letting go and forgiving doesn't mean giving them permission in your life if they don't respect that. That's just as a side to remember, because sometimes people conflate those two ideas. But I want to leave it at that. Those three ideas I want you guys to consider before we go on our session on Thursday about love. We're going to go much deeper. And I'm actually going to share the worksheet today, right after this call. Work on it this week and look at it as a practical exercise. How are you operating in your day-to-day life? Have you let go of the hurts in your life? Are you working through it? How does that affect your perception? Do you show up with intention in your relationships, with the intention of love? And do you recognize that it actually takes courage to love every moment, or you just think of it as a whatever thing? And I'll leave it at that. I'd love to hear what was the biggest insight here. If you could put it in the chat, and then we'll share some verbal insights. You can put what was the biggest insight in today's session.